His agenda is incredibly ambitious. It is, as he has described it, a democratic socialist agenda. Free childcare, free buses, rent freeze. The list goes on. I talked to him on Monday night. He said to me he hasn't wavered 1 millimeter on raising taxes on New York City's wealthiest residents to pay for some of that. Now, Governor, you have said repeatedly that you would not raise taxes. You said, quote, I've said there's no new income taxes. Do you stand by that promise?
Yes. Again, what I find so fascinating is all this conversation about how I'm continuing to lead New York State. I'm the one putting money back in people's pockets and cutting middle-class taxes, as I've done, and finding ways to support child care. These are areas where I'm aligned with Zohran Mamdani. And we'll work on this and build more housing so people can have a roof over their heads in New York City.
So we've already been talking quite a bit about the internal tension that is already beginning to build between the newly elected New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani, you might have heard of him, and the New York State Governor Kathy Hochul. And as promised today, I do want to give some coverage to potentially what the electoral ramifications could be for Hochul as an already unpopular incumbent governor going into the 2026 election. Because on one hand, I think it goes without saying that the attacks from Republicans in the opposition are already going to come over that very controversial and frankly politically miscalculated endorsement that she gave to Mamdani. After all, as we've been trying to explain to people, despite all this progressive propaganda, actually Zohran Mamdani is not that popular. If he only got 50% of the vote in deep blue New York City, then it certainly logically equates that outside of the city, in the rest of the state, in the much more moderate or purple areas, Zohran is far below 50%. And after all, if this is going to be something that the Republicans effectively tie to Kathy Hochul, right? They equate her with Zohran Mamdani and the election becomes a referendum on Zohran, then that could, of course, pose serious problems for her. And of course, why did she endorse Mamdani? What was the logic there? Well, it was entirely to appease the progressives, right? She thought that they would like her. She could ride the progressive energy, and maybe that would fend off a primary challenge against her in 2026. And I'm here to break the news to her. None of those things have happened. First of all, even after the election, she's still getting booed and protested, and chants of tax the rich by Mamdani supporters are still coming in her face, even outside of New York, right? Even in Puerto Rico, she's getting freaking protested by the Mamdani supporters. So needless to say, they do not like her very much, but a big component and underlying reason for this is something we talked about in a video just a couple days ago, is pretty popular with you guys actually, which is that it comes to, right, the funding of Zohran Mamdani's pet projects, right? Kathy Hochul has already publicly gone out and said she refuses to raise the New York State income tax. In fact, she's trying to lower them, and her campaign platform is no new taxes. Well, Zohran Mamdani is demanding that New York State raise the income taxes in order to fund the free buses. So it's already basically happened for Zohran that his mayorship is a political failure. He's not going to be able to fulfill his campaign promises there. But instead of blaming himself or taking accountability, what could be the easy out for him and his supporters in 2026? I think you know where this is going, right? It's to blame Kathy Hochul and say, Kathy refuses to fund our agenda. Let's all get behind her, get behind a primary challenge against her. And I'm here to tell you that has already begun, as apparently her own lieutenant freaking governor is running against her in the 2026 primary, and it's not looking good for Kathy on those two different fronts. Again, attacks from the progressives, attacks from the Republicans. It's not creating a very good situation for her when it comes to popularity or electability, and we'll tell you all about that in today's video. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. That's not only the best way to support our work, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And with that said, much like the Mamdani rally that she spoke at and got booed out of the building just before the election, apparently, you guys might know this, but the Democrats, many of the top politicians, went to this retreat in Puerto Rico right after the election, which, you know, you'd expect is full of, like, the donor types, the political class, right? But no, instead, even among these people, I don't know what they're even doing there, but in Puerto Rico, she is facing protesters who are chanting, tax the rich at her. Take a listen.
Hear you? But I'm the type of person, the more you push me, the more I'm not going to do what you want. Okay? So a little lesson to all of our friends out there. But hey, labor is in the house, right? Labor in the house. York is in the house.
Yeah, well, I think we know where this is going, right, folks? In fact, I think you have to be a complete idiot not to see it. Who Kathy Hochul is, by the way. She is the only person in this story who apparently thought it was all going to end well for her. Kathy, what did you think was going to happen when you tried to bend the knee to the angry mob? You know, it's really like a French Revolution style story. Oh, I supported them. Surely they're not freaking crazy lunatics, right? The Jacobins won't come for me. Oh, but they did, though. Same thing in the BLM riots in 2020, right? It's the same type of behavior. Oh, we put a sign that says black-owned business or we support BLM. Did that stop the looters? No, right? You're dealing with a insane, violent, far-left mob here, and you basically end up with what you deserve in that situation, right? And it certainly doesn't help Kathy, by the way, on just many political levels, that she's completely uncharismatic and weird, right? One thing about me is that I'm not going to do what you tell me. It's like the totally out of touch teacher who her voice is like, you know, nails on a chalkboard. Doesn't she remind you of that? But anyways, that said, guys, everything I'm trying to bring up to you is not hypothetical. As a matter of fact, as we speak, in fact, just during the summer, right as Zohran Mamdani was winning the primary challenge against Andrew Cuomo, Kathy Hochul is already facing a high-profile, far-left progressive primary challenge, ladies and gentlemen. And it is not coming from some random YDSA activist. I can't make this up. It's coming from her own lieutenant governor who is running against her. That is right. Here is the story. So New York Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado launched a Democrat primary challenge against Kathy Hochul on Monday, saying in a video announcing his campaign that the state needs, quote, bold, decisive, transformational leadership. We've heard that many times from Democrats. What does it really mean? You're not fighting hard enough against Donald Trump. That's what it means. You're not being far left enough, right? And if you don't believe me, okay, take a listen to this. Let's not drop the ball on figuring out what it is we're fighting for. Yeah, fighting for Trump derangement syndrome. That's what all Democrats do. We believe in facts, truth, liberty, the rule of law, and justice for all. Listen, the powerful and well-connected have their champions. I'm running for governor to be yours. Oh, so you're just copying the Zohran Mamdani style, right? I'm grassroots. I'm a person of the people. Now, Delgado did not mention Hochul by name in the video, but he did tell the New York Times that people are hurting and New York deserves better leadership, right? In other words, he's going to be more far left. He's going to be more against ICE, well, blah, blah, blah. Now, Hochul selected Delgado, this guy, to be lieutenant governor and her running mate in May 2022. After the then Lieutenant Governor Brian Benjamin was arrested on charges related to campaign finance fraud, which, what is going on in New York State? You know, we've always known it's the mafia state, but you got Andrew Cuomo, you got this guy getting arrested. Somehow Hochul, the least talented person of all time, ends up the governor as a result of it. What a complete and total mess. But Delgado fueled speculation he could challenge Hochul when he announced in February he would not be Hochul's running mate as she seeks another term next year. Oh, so it's already happening. Now, here's the thing, and I think you can tell what's going on here. Delgado and Hochul have had some high-profile disagreements, including when Delgado called on President Joe Biden to end his 2024 re-election bid and said the embattled New York Mayor Eric Adams should resign. By the way, who's been saying that the entire time again, guys? The progressives. There you go. So Delgado obviously could be facing a tough race, but yes, if Zohran Mamdani either endorses Delgado or even stays out of the race, right, doesn't endorse Hochul, you can already see how politically vulnerable she is. Yes, that could create a huge deal of political problems for her, but guys, that's only one side of the story. On the other hand, let's talk about Elise Stefanik. If Kathy does survive the primary, which I'm very skeptical of, but if she does, what would she be facing in the general election against the Republican? Well, look, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, okay? I don't want to do a repeat of New Jersey where, you know, we really thought we had a chance or whatever, but it's worth noting at the same time. 2026 is going to be a different election, right? It's not the same as 2025. So don't just stay home and think, oh, you know, we're screwed either way. No. You can see a huge shift. Even look at 2021, where Republicans swept, and then the next year it's a red trickle, right? So, you know, these things can happen. But nonetheless, worth noting that the last time Kathy Hochul was on the ballot against Lee Zeldin just 4 years ago, she only won the election by about 5 points, which for New York State is a shockingly bad and atrocious margin. So she's always been a weak candidate. She's a terrible governor, as many people know. And many polls within recent times We have one from before the election, just about a month ago, showing the Republican Elise Stefanik only 5 points behind the deeply vulnerable Kathy Hochul in this governor's race. Another one more recently apparently even has Stefanik up by 1 point over Kathy Hochul. So not a very good situation that she is walking into for sure.
The race for New York's governor is still more than a year away, and while several names are still circling around the ballot to take on Kathy Hochul, polling is underway, giving a glimpse at what next year's race might look like. Our Capitol correspondent Jamie DeLine takes a look at new numbers for one of her biggest potential contenders.
While Congresswoman Elise Stefanik has not officially announced a gubernatorial run next year, signs continue to point in that direction with a new Gray House poll sent out by her office. The poll, with a 2.6% margin of error, found current Governor Kathy Hochul has only a 5-point lead over Stefanik. It also found a majority, 59% of voters, think it's time for someone new to be governor. According to a memo from Landon Wall, founder of Gray House, Stefanik has a slight lead, 46.4% over Hochul's 45.9% when, quote, voters hear both candidates' records if the 2026 election were to be held today. Of the 1,250 people polled in the Gray House poll, 605 were Democrats, 333 were Republicans, and 312 were unaffiliated or other. In a statement, Stefanik said, quote, the data is clear. Kathy Hochul, the worst governor in America, is a deeply embattled and historically unpopular failed governor who is struggling to even gain support from her own party.
Now, look, it's obviously a long ways away, and I'm not trying to hype up anything too much. You know, I don't know if these polls are necessarily the most accurate, but what they do show, and this is important, is the vulnerability of Kathy Hochul, right? So if it were to happen, why would it happen? It happened on one hand because, as I said, that civil war with Zohran Mamdani is going to explode. Let's say Kathy faces a progressive primary challenge that will greatly weaken her because, again, she's such a bad candidate. I mean, just listen to her, right? She's like the least likable person ever. And she narrowly survives that primary, but she does so, she's already wobbly, right? And then what happens in the general election? Well, the many anti-Mamdani, even anti-Mamdani Democrats out there who are tying Kathy Hochul to Mamdani, and that would have to require some type of very good Republican messaging, and you got to blitz that thing home, and you got to make sure the election is a referendum on Mamdani, right? But they could be motivated either to vote for Stefanik or simply not vote, right? But then secondly, let's talk about the progressives. Let's talk about the hardcore Democrat base that really loves Mamdani. Well, after all, if Hochul is also simultaneously seen by them as a rival of Mamdani, then that's how Stefanik could win, right? Divide and conquer, because the progressives basically stay home and boycott her because they're like, screw her, right? We don't like her. She's standing in the way. And then, of course, on the other side, the anti-Mamdani moderates don't want to vote for her either because basically they see her as the opposite of the progressives, right? So don't get me wrong. That is a possible outcome. It is a long shot, again, simply just because it is New York and it's a 2026 year when obviously, you know, the incumbent president is a Republican, and so Trump's going to be kind of on the ballot whether you like it or not. But it's something interesting to watch for sure, right? Just because of how bad Hochul actually is. And you already are seeing this from the Stefanik campaign, again, trying to make sure the election is about Mamdani, because that is how Republicans could win across the state.
Do you run with Donald Trump as a partner, or do you run without him?
So I run as Elise Stefanik versus Kathy Hochul. Kathy Hochul is going to try to make this about Donald Trump. This is about Kathy Hochul's failed record. She is an accidental governor. She is only in this position because she was Andrew Cuomo's lieutenant governor, who then had to step up when Cuomo was pushed out. That she faces a primary herself. Her own hand-picked lieutenant governor is primarying her. I am running on my record of results. Of course I will work with President Trump. New Yorkers know that. But the polling already shows, Bill, despite the fact that New Yorkers know that I'm a strong ally of President Trump, I'm polling within single digits and in some polls ahead of Kathy Hochul. So we can win this race. And that's because traditional Democrats and independents know that under Mamdani and Hochul, the Democrat Party has been embraced by socialists. They have been taken over. So we're winning traditional Democrats.
Yeah, look, Kathy Hochul's in a very tough spot right here, because you can't run for governor of New York State by telling people in Schenectady and Utica that they're going to pay taxes out the nose to fund Zany Zohran's communist fantasies in New York City. But as a Democrat, she also can't run by telling Zany Zohran supporters in New York City, whose votes she needs, to kick rocks. I thought the most telling moment of the entire campaign was that big Mamdani rally in Queens, and Bernie Sanders and AOC go out and the crowd goes wild. And poor Kathy Hochul, she walks out there, she gets jeered, she gets heckled. It looked like something out of the Cultural Revolution in communist China. She just didn't have the sandwich board. And she tried to play that off and say like, oh, I thought they were saying, let's go Bills. But I mean, that was like The Simpsons when Smithers says to Mr. Burns, oh, they're not saying boo, they're saying boo earns. Those cats in Flushing, John, they weren't saying boo earns. And it's a problem for Kathy Hochul. And it's going to be one for Zohran.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens in the end. But I think one thing is for sure. This will not go down as a normal drama-free re-election campaign for Kathy Hochul. Whether it's from the left or the right, she is vulnerable. She's going to slip up in some way. Maybe she gets reelected still, but it's going to be on very shaky grounds. Why does that matter, by the way? Because the New York governor's race, especially considering it happens on midterm years, is about far more than simply the governorship. What do we mean? Well, think about it, right? So if Republicans lose the governorship, but have a nice night, right? A good performance. They overperform what the typical expectations are, whether that's because Kathy Hochul is running as a super unpopular incumbent, or this Delgado guy is running because he won the primary, but he's sort of like a progressive radical who's not liked in other parts of the state. Then think about the impact, guys, that's going to have on the down ballot congressional races. That's also what's very important. You may remember in 2022, it was actually the swing districts in New York State that were taken by Republicans that ultimately delivered the House victory for the GOP. And Hochul's basically giving that gift to us again, right? Because nationwide, it's supposed to be a blue wave year momentum-wise because, you know, incumbent party, the opposition's mobilized. That's usually how the historical trend goes, right? The Democrats win when the Republican is in office during the midterms, okay. But now this is the counterbalance. The counterbalance is Zohran Mamdani, right? This is going to, and Kathy Hochul, by the way, this is going to be a motivating factor for Republican turnout. So it'll be interesting to watch, right? I'm not promising anything, but it's definitely, you know, something to keep an eye on for sure. And yeah, needless to say, Kathy, endorsing Zohran didn't save you. As a matter of fact, it may have just made everything worse. But that said, let me know your thoughts. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.